I'm Kai, this is everything you need to know about manga paneling in 5 minutes or less. Typically manga use between 1 to 5 panels. Back in the day you could find a lot of manga that use more panels, but nowadays it tends to be less panels and less text overall. 6 panels is fine too, but anything above that is really cluttered, and people don't want to be reading all that. The number one beginner mistake I see when it comes to manga paneling is keeping panels too symmetrical and not using any kind of asymmetry at all. It tends to make the reading experience very boring and very bland for a reader. To make this more interesting, you want to use different variations of paneling. Use squares, rectangles, and such. When it comes to using asymmetry, it's easier to choose a side and stick to that instead of going straight down the middle all the time, as you can see here. And even different pages, you want them to feel different. Paneling is also the pacing behind how we perceive a story. So using bigger panels in specific areas is going to be very important. Typically you want to lead up to a big conclusion by using smaller panels and building up to a strong punchline. Sort of like this. And as I talked about earlier, using variations of different panels can help you get there. Have a look at some of your favorite mangas and you'll see what kind of variation of panels they typically use, and you can apply it to your own work. Aside from varying different panels, you also want to vary the shots you're putting inside the panels. Another super common beginner mistake is that they use too many headshots in their panels. This can be very annoying to a reader and very boring. If you've ever thought to yourself, my manga pages are so flat, that's probably why. So instead you want to use a collection of different shots, including establishing shots. Establishing shots are what we're going to use to show where your character is. Naturally, you want to show that your character's in a building at the start of a scene or near the start of a scene. An establishing shot doesn't always have to be the first thing you see on a page, but it does have to show up at some point, unless you're going for a specific vibe or something like that. Generally, improving the backgrounds that you use in your panels will make your pages more interesting overall. Even if you are just drawing characters and you don't draw any backgrounds at all, using different shots for the characters that you're drawing, showing them from further out or closer in is going to help you feel a lot better, rather than using face shots all the time. Loki, this is where a good understanding of perspective can come in. Generally, just showing your characters from different angles and perspectives can really make your pages stand out a lot more, in my opinion. You'll peep that a lot of people's favorite pages are pages that, either have backgrounds or are in some super cool perspective. Something like, you might see from Yusuke Murata or something like that. Something else you're going to need to keep in mind is the speech bubbles versus the shots that you're actually using. In various different shots, you're going to need to decide what you want readers to view first. For example, if a character says, I eat cheeseburgers, it's the first time the character appears, so you're going to want to show the speech bubble first, and then we show the reveal of the character. This can be a very interesting way to show off new characters. Of course, this doesn't always have to be the case, it's just an example. And onto a little more of the complex stuff. We really want to keep our panels super interesting, so there's going to be a couple things that I want you to keep in mind. Namely, character overlap. For example, you can overlap a character over a panel and make them pop out. You'll see this used a lot in a lot of different various manga to make the pages more interesting. Actually, comics use this a lot too, especially in the 90s pages. In addition, what you can also do is overlap panels with other panels. This will also make your stuff a lot more interesting. You really do want to be careful of this though, because it can get very complex very fast and you can really confuse your readers. I remember when I was starting out with it and I used to make my pages so cluttered and so full that it was actually not even readable. But these two specific things are going to make your pages a lot more interesting when you find different ways to add them. And I think it's here that when people say you have good paneling, they're typically talking a little bit about this and about the next thing I'm going to talk about too. And that is composition. When it comes to composition, I think this is typically what people mean when they say that you have good paneling. In other words, they're saying that you have good shots and the things that you choose to show are very interesting. I don't think I can really talk about paneling without going over composition, even just briefly, because it's going to be one of the most important parts. But getting back into sort of the fundamentals of making an interesting composition, I would say that you should always keep in mind the rule of thirds. The rule of thirds is essentially a golden ratio where you have 2 vertical lines and 2 horizontal lines. Essentially, your important information is going to be put where the 2 lines intersect. And how does this apply to manga, you might ask? Here, you don't only put characters or, different important things. You can also put your speech bubbles there. And you can peep this in a lot of different mangas that you read. You'll notice that in a lot of different mangas, they'll put the speech bubbles inside of the golden ratio, which is the rule of thirds. It's not something that you see 100% of the time, but it's something that's really interesting that you should look into. And since this is the position our eyes naturally rest in, and that's what we typically find to be attractive when we're looking at composition, it can make your pages a lot more interesting. In addition, when it comes to composition, what you do want to do is use foreground characters to frame a shot. Essentially, you can have a shot within a shot, sort of like this. As you can see, the foreground characters in the shot and it's sort of framing the character in the background. This puts a lot of emphasis on the character because it frames them in the shot. You can find so many different unique ways to use this kind of method. You can use, different environmental things. You can use a bunch of different stuff to just frame your shots. And it can get really, really interesting. In addition, you can use a lot of different shapes to frame shots and draw attention to specific things in your composition. I suggest checking out Witch Hat Atelier. And that was manga in 4 minutes and 50 seconds actually. So if you really enjoyed the video, leave a like and subscribe. Peace out. And don't forget about panel flow too. You're gonna have to watch another video on that. My bad, teehee.